Faraaz, which is directed by Hansal Mehta, produced by Abhinav Sinha, T-Series and Mahana Films. I would like to spend 2 minutes talking about how special this film is for all of us who've been involved in its making. It's a film that speaks to the present moment very urgently. It's a film that has a bunch of new talent that's going to explode on screens once all of y'all would have seen the film, which releases on 3rd Feb. It's a film that is exceptional in its writing because it speaks about, it tackles a conversation which we routinely are uncomfortable having. And I think which is the speciality of a filmmaker like Hansal Mehta. He usually gets into conversations that are important but are usually, sort of avoided. So without wasting any more time, I would like to call Mr. Hansal Mehta on stage. Hansal sir, now is the time to show up.
Thank you. So, as you can see, your colleague Ankur is on the other side. So, thank you.
Thank you, Hansal. Long time we haven't met.
Yes. Yeah, since last night.
Since last time. It's the release week. This is a project that has been with you since I think 2019, which is a long time for one movie to simmer. What are your current feelings? It's basically I'm asking आपको कैसा लग रहा है?
You tell me. It's like delivering one of your most beloved babies. Because you spend so much time trying to make this film happen. Once the film, actually when Anubhav decided to produce the film, we had lockdowns, continuous lockdowns. Can you switch on your mobile? Yeah. We had continuous lockdowns and we had to shoot within a bubble. So there was struggle shooting the film. Then there was, after the lockdown there was litigation. I'm nervous, but also happy and relieved that finally the film will be seen by the world.
So before we bring in the boys, I wanted to ask, post-scam, there is this burden of expectations that people have projected on you. Do you yourself sometimes feel that you have to deliver something as, impactful as that? Do you think about that a lot?
No, I don't. If you do that, and the moment you start letting those expectations weigh you down, you end up only, doing lesser work than you did in the past. For me, it's always a fresh start. A lot of young filmmakers ask me, where does your energy come from? It comes from, letting go of what I've done in the past. So, that I don't have an archive of any of my old films. I have no copies of my old films. I don't watch my old films. And I dwell upon them only for the learnings that I get from them. But it's like a new beginning. Every day is like a new beginning. February 3 will be a new beginning, we'll be embarking on something else and we'll start afresh, go into the editing studio, look at the edits of my show and, life just goes on.
Would you like to bring in Zahan and Aditya?
Yeah, I want to introduce two really special boys, Aditya Rawal and Zahan Kapoor. To all of you. Both these boys are Nepo kids. Yeah, but but unfortunately, it's not the kind of launch that a Nepo kid normally gets. So there's a Kapoor boy, Zahan Kapoor, who is being launched as a very unlikely hero. He does not have a heroic entry. He's being launched as a boy who discovers his courage through an ordeal of one night. He's a boy who discovers the strength that is within him, the strength of humanity that he discovers through the process of the film. And what is commendable is that Zahan chose to do this film as his first film. When there are opportunities around you, where you can get launched as a conventional hero. And he wanted to make this beginning, wanted to explore his life as an actor, and for that alone, he needs to be applauded. It's a choice, it's a tough choice to make, and it's a wonderful choice to make. And I have Aditya Rawal, who you've seen once or twice. I hope you've seen less of him, because this film will show you what he's capable of. He's capable of killing people. He's, there's something really terrible lurking in that smiling face, and I've got the worst out of him in this film. So yeah, but I mean, these two boys are talented. They are a generation of actors, who we believe as, this generation. So this film is like an exploration of this generation, and through them I have explored this generation. You always believe that these young people are on social media all the time. They are distracted. They have an attention deficit. But in them, I discovered a spirit that we often ignore, and that spirit is what they have portrayed through their work in this film. So yeah, I give you Zahan Kapoor and Aditya Rawal.
Round of applause for these two very promising newcomers. Yesterday I was talking to Rajkumar Rao, who'd come to see the film, and one of the things that he pointed out about Faraaz is that it completes your Muslim trilogy, so to speak, Shahid, Mehta, and Faraaz. Also, if one sort of probes and looks at patterns in your work, we can see there is a preoccupation with young Muslim men who are persecuted, including by the shot that you did in Modern Laugh. So I'm sure that's not by design that you chase these subjects, but subliminally they come and they are a reflection of your thoughts. How does that process work?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I always say that you don't find stories; stories find you, and that's what happens. You sort of oscillate towards a story that reflects your concerns about the time that you're living in, about the world that you inhabit. And I think Faraaz is part of that exploration. Shahid began as an exploration of the othering, the others, and the othering of communities. So when you say Muslim, for me Muslim is replaceable. Anybody who's other, and we often skirt these questions, we often ignore these questions, we often take a back seat on these questions. We are passive about facing those questions. Can we just have silence there, please? Piche? Or Piche, please, sorry. Very distracting. Yeah. So we often let those. So these are just films about difficult conversations of our times. And so Faraaz is a step in that direction. So when with Shahid we started a conversation about the othering and about a young man who within that a system that is loaded against him finds a quest for truth, finds his nobility, who discovers his nobility. In Ometa, we sort of explored the completely opposite side of the axis. In Faraaz, we are taking head on this conversation of this good versus bad, and using religion to justify the bad. So it is tackling that head on. I think the trilogy, these concerns will not be completed in a trilogy. I think this is it's an ongoing process. So if you look at this poster, Article 15 Shahid, that it's very telling. So Article 15 can be seen as a part of the same series. There's a story about the othering of caste, religion, until we put people in boxes and we, continue this good versus bad based on people's religious or social identity. We will continue this kind of discriminatory and binary debate.
Zahan, I wanted to ask you, Hansal joked about being an advocate. Usually, I mean, it's not misplaced. Usually, the idea is that, if somebody from a star's family is getting launched, it's a typical conventional heroic debut. You've consciously, and it would have been fairly possible for you to go that route. But you chose this, like a relatively independent film, which, focuses more on the story, not the stardom. Little a bit about those choices.
First of all, like I'm completely aware and very very fortunate to be given that opportunity by a filmmaker like Hansal sir. He saw me hanging around Prithvi and he felt something would fit in his mind. At the time, I was trying to seek out opportunities myself. I wanted to go through the route of theatre. Aditya and I both have a very strong connect to live performance, and we've grown through that medium and discovered our love for the craft from there. And from my perspective, it was always, I mean, these were very nice things, and it's very nice to be in a situation where people can say that you have access. But from me, it was very clear that I wanted to be a part of stories, I wanted to be a storyteller, I wanted to do anything I could to learn and to be in the right position to be able to grow. Hansal sir offered an opportunity of, like he said, it is a part of his process of discovering stories, discovering a character, understanding what makes them tick, a flawed sense of humanity, of how people just struggle with these questions with their lives. And I think all of his movies somehow always find that rust. And it was something that instantly felt like this is not a calculation. This is this is a genuine attempt to communicate to an audience something very profound, something very soulful, something very current and urgent. And to be a part of that, I think, is the most beautiful thing. So, genuinely just want to be here to serve the story. It is an incredible story. It's a very powerful story. And it is our great fortune that we are allowed to try and give that story some sense of life, some sense of voice. So it's an opportunity that we have been given, and I hope that we have managed to at least put our energy forward and do it some sense of justice. So it's not about making choices as much of it as it is about hopefully just leading from the heart. Yeah.
It's very well said. Aditya, I wanted to ask the part that you play of Nibras. It's a dark role. It's somebody who's completely sort of convinced about the ideology that he's standing for. But what makes it stand apart is that he also feels very human. There are a bunch of contradictions in that character and the way you play it. How was this journey to sort of humanize a part that is so clearly, demonic?
So to begin with, I think it was in the script. It was in Sir's brief as well. The idea that these are not your run-of-the-mill Khunkar terrorists that you watch in cinema very often. They are human beings. They are, in many ways, lost boys. Sir mentioned the point about religion. Religion can lead to a lot of good, but it can also lead to a lot of bad because it's about how you react to it as an individual, right? Eventually, it's, as you would say, it's a zaria of getting to some place, right? So I think it was from the get-go, the idea was always to humanize them because they are, they're lonely, they're lost, they're angry, they're unfortunate that at a particularly vulnerable moment in their lives, they had the wrong person put an arm around their shoulder. That is the real tragedy. And that was something that Hansal sir was very conscious of, was very intent on from the get-go. It's there in the script. I mean, you see the first scene, and we've often spoken about it, where you get that these are boys, they're kids. They could have very well been going to a college match or a football match or something like that. So I think it was always there. And the opportunity to sort of dig into that and go deeper and deeper into, the person that the character I'm playing as opposed to the external action of going and shooting up a cafe, holding people hostage. I think it was always the intent was always there from the get-go. But I will say that I inherited it in many ways as opposed to sort of initiating it.
Right. Hansal, I wanted to ask you for you to sort of, from a direction perspective, for about nearly 120 minutes, you're confined in one space in the film. You're held hostage with the people who are held hostage, and even as a viewer, to sustain that kind of tension for that long, was that very particularly challenging for you?
Yeah, every film, you take on a film, one is because of the story, that the story and the characters appeal to you. The other is that how do you tell the story, the telling of the story. And that telling is where the craft comes in. And my theory on craft is that craft is always invisible. That craft should not come in the way of the film. So how do I make my craft invisible and yet make the film engaging? That was the challenge. So when a storytelling challenge sort of presents itself to you when you're about to start making a film, that's when you feel alive as a filmmaker. And I make films because they keep me alive as a storyteller. They keep me alive. They keep me going. If I wasn't making films, if I wasn't on a set, I don't know if I would be here sitting in front of you today. It's the only reason I am. So, and every film, it's a kick. It's a kick that I get. What do I do? How do I make this absorbing? So we sort of we ask for trouble often. Okay, now you have this chamber drama. You're stuck in a chamber, and you have people outside on the streets. You have the entire system outside, and you have this place held hostage. And now what do you do? So there was a script that we wrote with the map of the cafe in mind, the geography in mind, and suddenly the set was completely different from the geography in the script. So all the readings we had done, all the workshops we had done, went out of the window. So suddenly you are presented with a challenge when you are there on set, and okay, now what do we do? So that was the fun, because then you are harnessing your instinct. And everybody, all the actors, everybody suddenly is relying on instinct that okay, what happens after this? What will you do? Will he stand near the window? Will he hide there? Will he ask for help? Will he cry? Will he keep quiet? So everything became a reaction to the moment. Yeah, so it was about, so ultimately I think it's about being in that moment and responding to that moment. It is not about that calculated performance or that calculated moment. It's there, it's all there in the script. There are lines, there are sparkling gems in the script, but it is how you sort of thread them together. You thread them together using instinct, so that the thread that binds those sparkling gems together is instinct, is discovering the story yourself.
To talk about the release of the film, it's releasing in limited screens on Feb 3rd. What was the thought behind that? Because it's a conscious decision to ensure that you scale up as we go along, or how did you and producer Anubhav Sinha arrive at that decision?
I think we know that we don't want to. We are not in that illusion that this film is a weekend film. This entire obsession with the weekend and the box office. I mean, the box office ultimately is the business of those who have invested in the film. So the yardstick that the box office becomes a yardstick for a film's success or its quality is something that has always upset many filmmakers like me. And so why that? And we've always sought producers who support the growth of a film organically. There needs to be an organic growth. There has to be an audience. That every film has an audience. We have to help the film find that audience. We have to allow it to breathe. It cannot just, every film cannot be this blockbuster on a Friday or a Saturday. It has to be given time to breathe. And I think that is the attempt over here. We are releasing it in 15 centers in approximately 100 odd screens. And these are select theaters and premium shows. And we want audiences to discover the film slowly. As more and more audiences go to the theater, talk about it, have conversations, and the audience, let the audience grow. So I mean, we are trying to you know, I would say reinvent the game, but to try and find more, find an audience for these films that we make. We want these films to, you know, Faraaz could have very easily been a film that would go directly to OTT. But the cinematic experience of Faraaz, you know, every film, you know, while there's a spectacle film, there's an RRR, there's a Pathan, there's also a Faraaz, which is also to be enjoyed on the big screen. You know, the tension, the immersive nature of the film is something, the sound, the entire, so there is a spectacle which is different from the spectacle that you would see in a Mission Impossible, but yet it is a spectacle. It is meant for the big screen, and we want this film to be enjoyed by audiences, not enjoyed, but at least I want the audiences to get immersed in the experience.
Hansal, now this is a question for all three of you before we open it up to the media. There is a narrative that's also emerged that, you know, why, you know, is an Indian filmmaker making a film about Bangladesh, and the slippery slope there is, are we profiting off the trauma of other people without, you know, are we the right people to tell that story? Now, I personally feel that's not a very smart argument, but how do you react to accusations such as those?
I don't even give attention to that. I mean, a story is a story. A story that appeals to me has obviously has larger, has a more universal appeal than you know, that one local story. You know, that is the reason the film is made in Hindi, so that I could take the story. I felt that this story had a global resonance. You know, this whole argument of the good Muslim versus the bad Muslim, which has been co-opted by those who want to incite hatred, who want to encourage bigotry. You know, we need to co-opt that. You know, people who believe that religion cannot be misused like this need to also co-opt that conversation, and I can do it only through stories. And you know, this story was a catalyst for that. You know, when I heard the story, when Zahan and I went to Bangladesh, we were moved by what we heard from the accounts that we heard from people. We were genuinely moved, and so human emotion does not have any borders. Stories are not bound by language. Stories are bound by hearts of those who see them. You know, so Holocaust films, have they been made in German? If you know, the Hollywood has made so many Holocaust films over the years. So I think we have to move beyond these petty arguments, and you know, how can you own something that affects all of humanity? No country owns it. I mean, we as a race need to empathize with the victims and completely denounce the actions of those who do these things.
Zahan, any thoughts on, you know, while playing something that is inspired by a real person, how do you like tread that tightrope?
To be honest, it was looking for guidance from the filmmaker, from Hansal sir. It has been, I mean, Aditya and I have spoken about this. This film, the conversation started in 2019 with me. We went to Dhaka, Bangladesh together to do research, to discover the story, to discover the character, to discover the version that we can present to hopefully touch everyone across border, across language. And we struggled through that, through 2 lockdowns, through everything. But we had nothing better to do in a way, and Hansal sir kept us busy. But it's a testimony to Hansal sir. He had every other offer coming at him. Post-scam release, it was I mean, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. But Hansal sir also stood by this story and that same instinct, whatever it was when he heard it the first time. So we were looking to that voice. And I think it is an honest thing for me to say that we surrendered to Hansal sir's approach and we were better for it. So it was not about us trying to impose our ideas, as much of it was how do we facilitate what we're trying to explore. And even Hansal sir was trying to explore it. It's not like he knew the answers. It was like, हम साथ में कर रहे हैं ना, तो करते हैं, देखते हैं.
So I'll give you the answer in short, in one sentence. The buck stops at me. Whatever you want to say, just tell him. Yeah, let him be.
So it's a fair point. Post Can, you could have worked with any of the top stars who were lining up to, get your time. But to take that risk of, working with absolute rank newcomers, groom them and, sort of facilitate their.
I don't know. I've never seen.
confidence.
It's not confidence. I've never worked any other way. Shahid could have been made with anybody at that time, a big star at that time. Of course, none of these big stars wanted to work with me. That's another thing. But there was Rajkumar Rao, who I met, and very instinctively I liked him. And so very often, this is one thing I always tell people. Okay, people say, okay, you make these films, and how do you measure the success of these films? I measure the success of these films by the success that the people who have participated in the film enjoy later in the industry. So very often a lot of these independent films serve the larger interest of the industry, the ecosystem. They feed the ecosystem with newer talent, with better talent, and the more talent that you create, the larger kind of stories that you start saying. So every film is not meant to be an RRR, but it is meant to feed an RRR. It is meant, the technician like Pratham who shot the film will go on to shoot a bigger film. So everybody, the entire ecosystem benefits from this kind of film, and I think we are that. I mean, we are all farmers. We are all farmers. We are harvesting talent, and the fruits are for everyone. You have to enjoy. You have to reap.
Okay, now we'll open up to the members of the media. So if any of you all have questions, please